Formula One on 5 Live.
One session into the 2025 Formula One season and we've already had 2 red flags. The complaints about the gravel are rolling in and we've had one big crash to cap it all off. Formula One is back in business then. Welcome back to live coverage of the Australian Grand Prix from Melbourne. We're about a 10-hour drive southwest from Sydney lies this Albert Park circuit, and ahead of us the next hour of practice, FP2, and continuing to unpick all the happenings is myself, Harry Benjamin, the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. With us as well is our pit lane reporter Rosanna Tennant. Where have you found yourself, Rosanna?
Well, conveniently in the pit lane, Harry.
And the shock.
Roasty toasty. This little bit of shade that there was in FP1 has now vanished. The sun has moved round and we are now basking in sunshine down here in the pit lane, but it's very hot. I'm just looking out across the start-finish straight and the fans are finding their seats in the grandstand, and I can tell you what, I can see a lot of papaya orange, a lot of number 81. Oscar Piastri, of course, is the home hero this weekend, along with Jack Doohan, but a lot more support for the McLaren driver. So the fans are finding their seats in the grandstand. The drivers are finding their way back to their cars after FP1, getting settled in. And for those of you who might be worrying about Ollie Behrman after that crash in FP1, the rookie Haas driver is absolutely fine. They have replaced his engine and gearbox, so he is back for FP2. There are a few question marks as to whether they could get it ready for the second session, but they have. So we are all set for FP2, Harry.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. We'll be back to you ever so shortly indeed. Mark, it was a big shunt for Oliver Behrman. On the exit of the really fast left-right sweeper, turn 9 and 10, found himself in the gravel and then, well, just lost all control. So while the car might be able to be fairly rebuilt fairly quickly, his confidence, on the other hand, might take a bit longer.
Yeah, it's certainly not the start to his full-time Formula One career that he was looking for, because on a circuit like this, and particularly on the first weekend of a new season, you're looking to gradually build confidence together with your lap time as the sessions and then the weekend goes on, and so he's kind of had the worst possible start. He'll have to just gather himself, reset and go again, and this goes down as valuable experience which he will need as his career progresses from this point onwards.
Well, we will have another hour of running in just a few moments time around this just over 5.2 kilometre track, 3.2 miles, made up of 14 turns, 9 to the right and 5 to the left. Of course, it's undergone a bit of work over the last couple of years. We've got 4 DRS zones as well, first of which going down towards turn 1, then you get it again in the short straight down to turn 3 before the approach to turns 9 and 10 down Lakeside Drive, and then out again through turn 10 before you get to the first 90-degree right-hander around the final sector of turn 11. So it can be, well, it's a fast track, it's one of the flattest circuits on the calendar as well, and it can be a challenge. And one of the challenges, Mark, we've been seeing in FP1 is gravel. And it's becoming a bit of a nuisance, particularly on the exit of turn 6.
Yeah, they've made some slight tweaks since last year, particularly around that corner, and one of those was bringing the gravel all the way up to the exit curb at the exit of turn 6. What it means, though, is that as drivers have sort of run wide, which they do, the speed, the lap time comes from cutting that corner as much as you can, straight lining it. And as soon as someone dips a wheel onto that gravel, it spits all of the small stones onto the circuit. And the big worry, of course, we've only had 1 hour of practice, we've seen it happen multiple times already. You imagine at the opening laps of a Grand Prix when it's slight chaos as those cars are finding their way through the first few corners. Almost certainly someone's going to end up in that gravel trap. We even got red flag this morning when they had to stop the session to be able to sweep it up. So they will be concerned, they will be looking at it, but let's hope they can find a sensible solution in what is actually a fairly short time period now.
Yeah, let's see if that can be dealt with. The sun is absolutely shining down, blue skies over this Albert Park circuit, surrounding the Albert Park Lake in this, well, what is for 90% of the year a public park, and then it's transformed the public roads within it are turned into a racetrack. And, well, for the first time in a few years now, the Australian Grand Prix will be the season opener, and it does have that buzz around it, doesn't it, Mark? It is nice to be in Melbourne. For me in particular, it's quite nostalgic, always tuning in for race 1, getting up at the crack of dawn, ready for FP1 or indeed FP2. if you're with us for FP2, well done. If you're with us for FP1, then fair play to you even more so. But it's just got that bit of excitement around it, which something like a Bahrain just doesn't quite have.
No, you're absolutely right. And, in all the years that I was working at McLaren and here for the start of the season, pretty much every year it was here. You get that back-to-school excitement feeling at the start of a new campaign. The city of Melbourne really embraces this race and kind of comes alive. There's an almost carnival atmosphere right throughout the city. There's bunting everywhere, there's events happening, and it's all celebrating the Grand Prix coming to town. So it just adds to the anticipation of a brand new season, and there's a lot ahead of this season. The fans here absolutely love it and really get involved. So with a bit of sunshine as we got right now, it just makes for a great weekend.
It is, and it's glinting off of the Alpine of Jack Doohan, one of the 6 rookies in the field and the second Australian on home soil to race around here on Sunday. Makes his way to the end of the pit lane because the green light is on and cars are heading out on track then for free practice 2. And for those who wish to do a sync up, it's coming at you now. 58 minutes and 57, 56, 55, 54 seconds remain of free practice 2, and already it's getting a little bit tight on the exit of the pit lane. Indeed, Lando Norris in the McLaren doing a practice start on the right hand side as you emerge, and then getting squeezed onto the grass as he came out onto the track by one of the Red Bulls. I'm just trying to get a closer look as to which one that is. I think it was Liam Lawson, and it actually forced Norris to put a wheel onto the grass on the exit.
I think what happened was Norris was sitting at the front of the queue of drivers waiting to get a practice start, and the Red Bull came past him and then almost immediately slowed right down. So Lando then launched as he was doing his practice start, but had nowhere to go, had to take to the grass. So yeah, racing already at the beginning of this practice hour.
Now, what can we learn, Andrew Benson, BBC's F1 correspondent, from the first free practice session? Lando Norris was fastest, ahead of Carlos Sainz in the Williams, and Charles Leclerc was third for Ferrari. So, is that our pecking order?
Definitely not. We get a much better idea of the pecking order in this session. Firstly, from the short runs, what happens basically is they go out for a little while now on usually the medium tyre, which I think looks like most people are on. A couple of hard tyres on the Mercedes there. 4 hard tyres on each of the Mercedes actually. And then they do what they call a quali sim. So that's a simulation of qualifying on lower fuel with soft tyres. And then after that, so we'll get some idea there, but they can still play around with the fuel loads there. Then we get the long runs, the race simulations, and that's when generally the clearer picture of the true competitive race order comes out, because there's no point doing a race simulation run if you don't run with a race level of fuel. So there's fewer variables. So if we add up the averages of those runs, we get a clearer view. We get a glimpse of that later in the session. I'll provide you the numbers for that. And then if you check the BBC...
Do what he wants.
Yeah, he went to the grass.
Right, that's Norris ahead then.
That was Liam Lawson and his race engineer just conversing about the little incident between the two of them, and Liam's engineer, which is Richard Wood, just on the radio saying, well, Lando can clearly do what he wants, but I just think a bit of a miscommunication there from the two drivers as they emerged out onto the track. So, well, yes, we are going to get a little bit more of an inkling into what the pecking order might well be at the end of this session.
What I will say, though, from just on the evidence of...
I got a box. There's a safety plug here. I've got in my hand from the fire extinguisher. Just need to drop that off.
Okay, understood. Box.
Nico Hulkenberg holding the pin to a fire extinguisher in his hand. That doesn't bode too well, but it sounds like they've caught it, and he'll come back into the Sauber. It's all go so far in FP2.
Let's hope it's not the pin to a grenade. But anyway, what I would say about P1 is that just from what we saw then, it did look like Ferrari and McLaren, I would say, were the two leading contenders out of the top 4 teams. Carlos Sainz was in the mix in the Williams. He continues to look good in that car. I don't think that's a reflection of their actual absolute competitiveness. Maybe I'm wrong, But the Ferrari and the McLaren appear to have an edge to me over the Red Bull and the Mercedes, at least from the earlier running. We'll get a clearer picture, as I say, a little bit later on. And what I was going to finish off by saying, Harry, was I'll do my best to get the averages in this session. I'll then get a much more accurate set of numbers a little bit later on this evening in Melbourne, so people can check back on the BBC Sport website for a more accurate analysis.
Either way, we're all waiting with bated breath for the first long run corner of the year, so that'll be something to look out for a little later this evening. The sound you just heard was Max Verstappen just having a little snap on the rear of his Red Bull coming through turns 1 and 2, and this is quite a tricky track, Mark, really, isn't it? Because the evolution is quite high. Of course, it's not a track that's used any other time of the year, so it's quite a dirty track. It's a green track, and of course you've got so many trees, eucalyptus trees and foliage over the track falling off. It's really a bit of a clear-up operation, certainly in FP1, and then continuing so into the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah, it can change a lot, and not just in the way that you described. So not just evolution in terms of getting quicker and quicker, but actually you can get steps backwards when we go into, say, FP3. If you've had a lot of wind overnight, you can get a lot of leaves, particularly if you have rain, and there is a chance we might get rain this weekend.
Still a lot of understeer.
That is the sound of Lewis Hamilton talking to his Ferrari engineers. For those of you who've just tuned in, that will be the first time you're hearing that. Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari with the number 44 on. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But yes, the circuit is a very tricky one. It's low on grip at this point in the weekend. The drivers are trying to figure out these new cars and what their characteristics are, together with a circuit that's constantly changing. So it's a real challenge.
Yeah, he's not a happy bunny, Lewis Hamilton, today, is he? That was the other thing I could have said about first practice, was he was definitely off the pace of teammate Charles Leclerc, and still is, although much less so. He's only a 10th down on this first run so far, Hamilton, which is encouraging, because he was half a second off in first practice. But understeer is something that Hamilton really doesn't like, and he's been complaining about it all day. So they've obviously still not fixed that for him in that Ferrari. By the way, Charles Leclerc doesn't like understeer either. They both drive the car very similarly. They've got very similar styles, attacking on the brakes. They don't mind a loose rear end. They don't want a nervous rear end, but they don't mind it being loose. They think that's good. It helps them turn the car, and their talent will sort out the rest. Mark will know that well from working with Lewis Hamilton at McLaren all those years ago. But let's see if they can do something about the handling of that car through the rest of the session at Ferrari.
This is Lewis Hamilton with his new helmet design, yellow with the red 44 on top, inside the scarlet red Ferrari, making his way through the right-hander of 4 into the left of 5. It's a short burst before you head through the right-hand kink, and heading down now towards the right-hander of turn 6. If you remember last year, this is where George Russell had quite a big off chasing down Fernando Alonso, and it's also where a lot of the cars at the moment are going wide and picking up gravel. Lewis Hamilton negotiates it expertly, also then gets a little bit of slipstream, I think, from Lando Norris as they head down Lakeside Drive, a slightly curved straight culminating in a quick left-right of turns 9 and 10. That is where we saw Oliver Behrman have a huge off in FP1. Behrman yet to emerge out of the garage, he should be said, still in the pit lane. Before you know it, you're hitting the brakes into the 90-degree right-hander of turn 11, and then it's a slightly more curved turn 12 before you then get into the final couple of corners. A tight left of 13 where you swing it back round the outside of the pit lane entry, and you're back onto the start-finish straight. The sun glinting down on Hamilton as he crosses the line on a medium tyre, 4.5 tenths off, down in 6th.
Yeah, so he's about half a second slower than George Russell's Mercedes on the hard tyre. And there are a whole load of caveats that we'll have to throw in to say that that's not necessarily just a genuine comparison. But I would say, Lewis talking about having understeer, and as Andrew said, he was talking about the same problem this morning. The lap looked pretty tidy. I mean, the effect of having understeer is that when you turn the steering wheel, the front end just doesn't bite, it doesn't turn in, it sort of washes across the circuit. And the only way from a driving perspective really to compensate that is to go into the corner a little bit slower. And so obviously it looks nice and tidy, it looks under control, but the overall lap time suffers as a result.
Just seeing a bit of traffic management issues as well. Carlos Sainz getting a little bit caught up coming into the right-hander of turn 11 behind the McLaren of Oscar Piastri, but no harm done. Most drivers out there on the medium tyre, with the exception of Russell, who is fastest on that hard tyre. Well, he's on the hard tyre now with a 1:17.565. Then it's Norris, Leclerc, Piastri. Verstappen is 5th ahead of Tsunoda. Hamilton down to 7th now. Tsunoda's just crossed the line and gone up to 2nd in the Racing Bull. His teammate Isaac Hadjar, one of the rookies in the field, the Frenchman, is down in 9th ahead of Stroll. Antonelli, then it's Lawson, followed by Hulkenberg, Gasly, Albon the top 15, then it's Doohan, Bortoletto, Ocon and Sainz at 19th, as I said, with no lap time yet from Ollie Behrman, but Sainz is on a quick lap, fastest of anybody in the first sector. Now, at the moment, we don't know what we're quite seeing, whether it's just showy lap times from Carlos Sainz and the Williams, or if indeed there is a little bit of inherent pace in there. There is a feeling after pre-season testing that the Williams has made a step forward as Sainz goes fastest to the top of the times, the race winner from last year. But I wonder, he's the real victim in all this Lewis Hamilton chat, right? And he's had to take the demotion, but I wonder if this Williams can be somewhat competitive this year and he can grow with this team, how much more satisfying that might be to achieve the podiums, the race wins with Williams.
I think you're absolutely right. This will, of course, have felt like a massive blow when it was announced all that time ago that Lewis Hamilton was coming to the team, and it was Carlos Sainz that was going to be asked to make way for him. It wasn't because he wasn't delivering. He's an excellent driver, delivered some brilliant results for Ferrari last year and drove superbly all season. Exited that team with pure class, I thought, put himself in a really strong position. But actually, I do wonder if you're right. I wonder if this Williams seat might end up being a much stronger proposition than we first think. Whether it happens this year, and yes, he's sitting top of the timesheets right now, although it's very, very early, he's Hulkenberg.
Just still had a big moment, turn 6.
Understood.
Went through the gravel quite at high speed. I think we should box check the car.
It's another moment at turn 6 that you were talking about, going through the gravel, Hulkenberg in the Sauber, dragging on more gravel onto the circuit. Just to finish the Sainz point, I think really what he was thinking when he signed for Williams was much more about 2026, where we get a whole new set of regulations with a team that's been in full rebuild mode under James Vowles for the last couple of years. They've obviously shown him and told him some things that are happening in the background that have been enough to tempt him to go down to that team for the future.
That incident that Hulkenberg had at turn 6, that really was a big one. He went right into the gravel and bounced over the transition between the gravel and the grass, and it wasn't that dissimilar from what happened to Ollie Behrman when he had the crash at turn 10 in the first session, and it just underlined for me actually the point I was making in first practice, that it still looks like that wall is very hittable and very much returnable to the track. Whatever the phrase is, you could definitely end up back on the track, which they've been trying to avoid.
I'll tell you what it also means, that Sauber and indeed the Haas do not look like very nice cars to drive.
We also saw, by the way, Lando Norris have a bit of a moment at turn 3, got a bit of a tank slapper on the exit, slid a bit wide and had to abort that lap, but he's running third fastest at the moment behind Sainz and George Russell's Mercedes.
For a Nico Hulkenberg, down in 18th at the moment, he has boxed to check the car. It's an odd move, I think. I get why he's gone to Sauber for the passport, the nationality. He's a German. They're going to become Audi, but and maybe it will turn out to be the right decision when we're sort of looking at Haas right now and thinking, are they actually making that much of a step forward at this stage? It doesn't look like they are. But for Hulkenberg to continue on and to be leading the charge for the Audi factory team, I don't know. Has he still got that get up and go? Has he still got that leadership quality in him?
Well, don't forget, that was an appointment made before the whole management structure at what will become the Audi team changed. So he's not even been appointed by the current leadership team. There may well be questions, I don't know, but I think you can look at it from both sides. If you're Audi and you're coming in as a fresh sort of start, a new campaign, you do want some experience, and there's very few people more experienced than Nico Hulkenberg on this grid. But what he hasn't got experience of is winning races, certainly not winning championships or even getting on the podium, unbelievably. So that's really what you'd have been looking for. But I think perhaps, the German nationality tie seemed like it must be a strong one. The trouble they've got is they've got such a giant leap to take from where they are now to where they want to get to as a major manufacturer in this sport. It seems unrealistic. The one caveat would be, as I said earlier, everything changes in 26. It might also almost level the playing field, and it's a big opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, well, Sauber will be hoping that means a jump forward in performance for them. But indeed, that midfield, so tight, expected to be even tighter this year as well, with the battle for 5th and downwards in the Constructors' Championship, looking like to be quite enthralling. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc, who was on a fairly quick lap, but then he's backed off coming out of the final corner, and either doesn't want to quite show his hand, or did he make a bit of a mistake as well in that final sector, and stays out on track to go again. It's Carlos Sainz, who currently has the fastest time on the medium tyre. He's a 1:17.302, a thousandth of a second clear of George Russell's Mercedes. Then it's the Ferrari of Hamilton. Now, Charles Leclerc, I think, had a bit of traffic on this run, hence he decided to bail out of it. Now, he's stuck behind. Might be one of the Alpines. The sun's glinting off the back of it.
Gasly coming through, careful.
I was in the middle, but Lawson was just blocking everybody.
Yeah, I saw.
I think that was the lap before. It wasn't an Alpine, it was indeed Red Bull's Lawson, as they almost pushing each other out of the corner, and then Charles Leclerc decides to head into the pit lane and be done with it, as Pierre Gasly becomes another victim of the gravel down this time. I think that's coming into the right-hander of turn 4, lock up on the front right.
I can't brake. I need to take the brakes because I keep blocking up.
Gasly then struggling with his brakes, and he's been quite bold with his expectations for Alpine this year. He is very much hoping for a top 5, and I think I said at the end last year they kind of did not quite the McLaren from plumb last to the very top, but they were not in good shape at the start of last year in Bahrain, locking out the back row of the grid, barely able to keep it on the track, and a massively overweight car, to then the podiums in Brazil, and managed to clinch 6th in the Constructors' title. It was a sort of a B-tier-esque version of what McLaren have been able to do.
I think their problem was it was quite inconsistent, because they did have some good results. There's no question that they had some strong performances, but it was a bit up and down. And I think the bigger picture at Alpine was that there was, slight chaos behind the scenes. There were management changes there. We've got driver changes. Esteban Ocon being effectively sacked before the last race of the season, or certainly put to one side to give Jack Doohan a run. So it seemed like the whole team was in some sort of flux. So they will need stability now if they're going to make progression, and that's what they've got, certainly in terms of the driver lineup. They've got their management team in place. Flavio Briatore back at the helm. Maybe that's something they can now start to build from.
Well, a mixture of cars out on track, but quite a few still in the pits. 42 minutes and 51 and 50 seconds remain. Rosanna, have you got anything for us?
Oh, I've just watched Kimi Antonelli being wheeled back into the Mercedes garage, and just next to Mercedes is Red Bull, and you've got Max Verstappen's garage on the right-hand side as you look at them, and Liam Lawson's on the left-hand side. Both Red Bull drivers are in at the moment. Mechanics working on the cars. The Max Verstappen side of the garage busy using a little drill to remove a little bit of the bodywork over the engine, so maybe just making a few little changes there. And I have to say, it's very, very warm here in Melbourne. It's about 24 degrees, beautiful sunny day here. Blue sky, just sort of hazy clouds, and a little bit breezy as I'm looking over the start-finish straight. A few trees blowing around in the breeze. And as I look over the start-finish straight, I can see the fans. Way more fans in the stands for FP2 than there were in FP1. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show that there's a lot of papaya orange and red Ferrari T-shirts out in the stands. Quite a few signs for Carlos Sainz as well. And there was a big cheer as he went fastest a little earlier on. So, yes, interesting to see where all the loyalties lie. Don't forget, there's a very well-known street called, a big cheer going up there as Leclerc went faster. So we've got a 1-2 for Ferrari. Cheering, clapping. There's a street in Melbourne called Lygon Street, which is where a lot of the Italian community live. And so there is a big Ferrari following here in Melbourne. And I think combine that with a following for Lewis Hamilton, you've got sort of double trouble, double bubble.
Now, Rosanna, be honest, did you know that before it was asked to Lewis in the press conference? Or
do you know what? I did actually, because I was at an event with the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry yesterday.
Name drop.
And they were having a chat with me about Formula One, and they were talking about Lygon Street, and they have a very multicultural community at the Chamber of Commerce, and so they were all very excited at the prospect of Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari this year, and of course what they might be able to do, and obviously the Tifosi are worldwide. It's not just in Monza and Imola that we see them. They travel around the world following the the progress and the success of the Scuderia Ferrari. So I know that they are really expecting great things this year.
Absolutely. Well, that was the Victoria Chamber of Commerce's Rosanna Tennant there down reporting for us. Actually, Rosanna, we've just seen Nico Hulkenberg's car up on the jack, so I wonder if you can take a little gander down there and see if he's caused any damage from going over that gravel. Looks like he has done.
I need to go check in with the Hinwil Chamber of Commerce. One moment, please, sir.
We're standing by. Andrew Benson.
While you guys were rabbiting on, I was looking at Charles Leclerc's sector times on that lap he had to abort, and I was going to say that he would have gone quickest on it, but he's now saved me the bother because he came into the pits to do something I'm not quite sure and came straight out again on the same set of tyres, and he has now gone quickest by quite a margin. He's, 7/10 quicker than George Russell in 4th place. Lewis Hamilton went out again at the same time. The Ferraris have both done 2 more laps than all the other cars, any other car I should say, and Hamilton has done a time exactly 4/10 slower than Leclerc, so they're running 1 and 2 at the moment, the Ferraris. Charles Leclerc in particular looking very, very fast today at Melbourne.
Yeah, could Ferrari be in the hunt here? All the talk has been about McLaren coming into this season strong, but will we get a fierce fight at the very front? Leclerc, Hamilton currently P1 and 2, that is Sainz, Russell, Norris and Piastri, the top 6. Rosanna.
If you were listening to us at FP1, you might have heard me talk about Lewis Hamilton explaining the differences in how the data is presented to him at Ferrari as to what it was at Mercedes. He said the data's actually upside down, and Carlos Sainz was laughing and agreeing that now he's at Williams, having left Ferrari, his data's upside down as well. But it was really interesting, given that Lewis Hamilton has always raced with a Mercedes engine. He was commenting on how different it feels to be in a Ferrari car, even saying that the vibration of the engine is different. So isn't it amazing, all these little idiosyncrasies that the different teams and the engines have? And that is what all the drivers are trying to get up to speed with during these critical hours of practice.
Well, you're so sort of tuned into these cars as a driver. You become one. You know, you're strapped in very tightly. You're in a seat that's moulded to the shape of your body. You feel every lump and bump, and you do feel things like the vibrations that come from engines. The engine's bolted directly to the back of the chassis, which is where the driver's sitting. So you're so, as I say, sort of tightly tuned in. You do get to know that car so well, and he's become so used to the way a Mercedes powertrain operates. That'll be everything from the way it feels, the way it drives, but also things like the tools he has available, the switch positions, and what those things can change with regards to drivability of those power units. So all of those details he's now got to sort of relearn to some extent to be able to get the best out of this Ferrari. He's got to be at one with that Ferrari, and with only 3 half days of testing in the pre-season build-up and now a practice session and a half under his belt, there's probably still a lot to learn.
It certainly will be. Well, he currently lies in second as Liam Lawson in the Red Bull begins a hot lap on the soft tyre. So let's see what the young Kiwi has got, doing 11 Grand Prix under his belt over the last 2 seasons. He's sort of done the back half of the season. He runs out wide on the exit of turn 4, clouting over the almost sausage-like curb there, manages to keep it going. It's about 4/10 off though Charles Leclerc's fastest sector time. Now, I don't think it can be underestimated just how much of a challenge Liam Lawson has on his hands. He has been the next lamb to be shown to the slaughter alongside Max Verstappen. Will he be able to match up?
Yeah, it's the great unknown, isn't it? No one's been able to do it yet, really. I mean, the closest that we ever really got was Daniel Ricciardo many years ago. So it's a difficult challenge for anybody. As I say, no one's found the solution to going up against Max, because he is one of those talents of a generation. There's no question about Max Verstappen and what he can do in a car, particularly in a car that has worked so well for him and his driving style for so many years. He's been so comfortable in that car, and it does exactly what he wants it to do. He's been dominant for seasons after season. This year, though, I would say, and towards the end of last year, he didn't quite have it all his way, did he? We didn't see a Max Verstappen that was entirely happy at times. Of course, he became world champion, so he couldn't have been that unhappy at the end of the year, but we saw a lot of complaints about the car and just struggling to get it to do exactly what he'd become used to. So maybe that's a glimmer of hope for someone like Liam Lawson. he can come in and challenge Max when maybe he's not at his best?
I hope Liam Lawson's not at his best at the moment, because he's just done that run on the soft tyres. He's still 4/10 slower than Max Verstappen's run on the mediums.
He went very wide though, didn't he?
And went into the gravel on the exit of turn 6.
Yeah, a couple of mistakes. One at turn 4, was it, where he went off track limits probably, if it was qualifying. I don't know whether they're policing track limits at turn 4, but if they are, he would have had that lap deleted, and then he brushed the gravel at turn 6. I don't think it cost him, that particularly didn't cost him much time, but certainly running wide at turn 4 wouldn't have helped. But still, he should be quicker, I think, even with those 2 errors.
We had this debate so much last year when Perez was under scrutiny, and in the end he got the chopping block. But who else could they have picked? Is Lawson actually the really viable option?
I think this is the quandary Red Bull find themselves in. Basically, if they pick a second string, if they keep picking second string drivers, and I'm not saying, by the way, definitively at this stage that Liam Lawson is second string, we're about to find out this year. If they keep picking second string drivers for that car alongside Verstappen, then the same thing's going to keep happening. It's the definition of madness. You know, you keep doing the same thing, you get then expecting a different result, doesn't happen. The only people they could put in that car who are going to hold a candle to Max Verstappen and challenge him, get close, as Kimi Antonelli comes towards the end of it's a slightly ragged lap in the Mercedes. It doesn't look like it's going to be that quick on the soft tyre. Are people like Leclerc, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, Piastri. But do they want someone of that ilk in that car? They don't really, because they want Max to win the championship. They don't want a challenge for him. They want someone to be a sort of decent backup. But the problem is that he's got such a singular driving style. He wants the car set up in such a singular way. There's not very many second string drivers who can do that and can handle that kind of car. So they're a bit stuck in a sort of in a self-created paradox, I would say. Yeah. And I don't see a way out of it for them.
The man who's just gone top is the one who was overlooked, Yuki Tsunoda, in the Racing Bulls by 10,000ths of a second. And it looks like this could be a pivotal year for the young Japanese racer. We'll come back to that, because let's nip down to Rosanna. I believe I sent you on a mission, Miss Tennant.
I know, and I think I've actually failed it, but I'm going to offer up something else. Because as I was on my way to Sauber to see what was going on with Nico Hülkenberg, I walked past Oliver Behrman's garage down at Haas, and the team had told me that they were going to make it out for FP2. They're still hoping to make it out. But as I mentioned before, they have had to replace the engine and gearbox. And as things stand, the car is up on the jacks. Wheels are off, obviously, front end is off. The rear is being looked at by the mechanics. They're all working hard. There are 5 mechanics at the rear end. One of the mechanics is in the cockpit. He's actually just getting out now. There are pipes attached to the car. I imagine that's all to do with the hydraulics. They are draped over the side pods near the radiator. There are machines all close to the car. It's a bit like it's an intensive care. That's how I would describe things. So, yeah, very busy in Ollie Behrman's garage at the moment. Really hope that he can get out, but at the moment they look some way off. As I look to the clock, we've got just over half an hour left of the session. He really needed time on track. It's a tricky track. He's raced here before, of course, but you just want to be out there, don't you? Just getting your bearings and learning everything you need to have a great year ahead. Okay, thanks, Rosanna. Yeah, let's hope Behrman can get out in time, and then if you could get along to Sauber and do as I asked, that would be yes, would be delightful. Thank you, Rosanna Tennant down at the pits for us. As she said, yeah, we're approaching less than half an hour left of this FP2. 32 minutes and 10 seconds remain of this session. It's Tsunoda currently fastest on the soft tyre, but Charles Leclerc has now put on the soft tyre, so we shall see what the Monegasque Ferrari driver has in store for us shortly. We've got Verstappen, Hamilton and Leclerc all out on the soft tyre, and Verstappen's just had a terrible time trying to get around turn 3, and he's already aborted his lap. Yeah, coming through turn 4 and he's completely lifted off, so we won't see what Verstappen has on this time around, and just has to get out of the way to let a couple of faster cars through. That was really bad. 3 bites he tried to take to get that car turned into turn 3. He's really obviously not a happy bunny at the moment, Max Verstappen. I was just going to say, we saw glimmers of this last year, didn't we, when he was fighting the car, and we're so used to seeing Max come out the box with a car that just works perfectly for him and is able to deliver a lap time at will. Now he's fighting with that car to get anything out of it, and so he'll start to get frustrated. The team, of course, will have options in what they can change to try and improve things. There'll be a lot of work happening overnight to try and do that.
but at the moment he's still a long way from being happy.
Yeah, and just getting another look as well, overshooting nearly turn 1, carrying so much speed was Max Verstappen, running out wide into the small bit of runoff you get, but it is all four wheels outside of the white line. So come qualifying, that would be a lap time deleted for Verstappen, who looks like he is struggling in that Red Bull. Of course, it wasn't a smooth FP1 either. It hasn't been a smooth FP2 for Nico Hülkenberg Sauber, has it, Rosanna? Do we have more news?
Oh, I do.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah, not sure what's happened there. We'll report him.
Yeah, he didn't even see me.
That was Isaac Hajar of the Racing Bulls, just getting balked on a quick lap and then finding almost the gravel and some more traffic coming onto Lakeside Drive. So it's starting to get busy, starting to get a little bit dicey out there in the last half an hour or so. And is Hülkenberg still confined to the garage, do we know?
Everyone loves a cliffhanger. If you've waited to find out, well done. Yes, I've made it up to Sauber. He was just heading out as I got there. They've changed his floor. And the FIA, Joe Bauer from the FIA, was there overseeing everything, taking quite an interest into what they were doing. But a new floor for Hülkenberg. So he obviously sustained some damage out there on track with the gravel that he ran across.
I was going to say, how many people are waiting with bated breath to find out whether they go?
I personally was. And you know what? My mind is so much clearer now. I can carry on with the rest of this FP2. Thank you so much, Rosanna. No, but good to see Hülkenberg back out on the track. They're getting some more mileage into that Sauber. His teammate Gabriel Bortoleto is out there having a fairly calm session as well. But we are seeing more and more running now on the soft tyre. George Russell out there at the moment. Norris has gone fastest for McLaren, a 1:16.5 ahead of Tsunoda by a couple of tenths, who's come back into the pits. We'll see what Charles Leclerc might well have. I think he's coming to about to start actually another lap time around, having switched onto the soft. No, he hasn't. He's come into the pits instead. But Russell then with not the best of laps on that soft tyre run,
it's like
across in 7th.
It's like something's happened to the track, because Leclerc and Hamilton were both out on outlaps, and neither of them got their quali lap away, or simulation lap away I should say. Russell's just completed one, but he's a second off the pace. Hamilton's come out again to have a go. Leclerc's just come out again to have a go. I don't know whether they were making wing adjustments or something maybe, but I wonder whether there's some gravel down there at turn 6. Something maybe that's slowing the drivers down, because Lando Norris got a lap time in just before they did, but no one's been able to get anywhere close to him since, or even get close to their medium tyre runs before.
It's also a very busy track right now, so there's a lot of cars on the circuit. Finding a gap around this circuit is definitely a challenge at times, and something that we need to be very much, or they need to be on top of when it comes to qualifying, because the final sector, the last couple of corners, which are very, very slow, left and right, sort of 90-degree corners before you get onto the start-finish straight, that's where they're all going to be wanting to try and make their gap and find the space they need ahead of a vital lap for qualifying, which can often cause chaos here.
Yeah, there's a huge gaggle of cars coming into the final sector of the lap at the moment. Stroll, Antonelli, Hülkenberg, and then all the way down Lakeside Drive. You've got the two McLarens, Doohan, Russell, Alonso, Sainz, all quite close to each other. So it is tricky to find yourself a bit of a gap out on the circuit. Jack Doohan, the Australian rookie for Alpine, has managed to find some time on the soft tyre. He gets himself up into 11th ahead of his teammate Pierre Gasly at the moment, who's down in 14th, but still seeing what everybody has got now that they have all switched on to that soft tyre. But Norris and Tsunoda look like to be the ones to get those quick lap times in. And it's interesting, just coming back to our Red Bull conversation, how much of a point to prove does Yuki Tsunoda have this year?
I mean, I think they've always got a point to prove, but the fact that he was overlooked, he'll feel clearly disgruntled about that. And so from his own personal perspective, let alone that of trying to sustain a career in this sport, he definitely has to prove something. And, you know, he will want to... We've seen this in the past at this Red Bull, the two teams at Red Bull, right? We've seen the younger drivers of the drivers in the sort of second team, often desperate to try and prove themselves to get the opportunity they need.
No one's looking in the mirror, it's crazy.
That's Gasly getting caught in traffic on the exit of turn 4, and well, maybe everyone's just a bit rusty at the moment, getting used to having to look in their mirrors again.
Lewis Hamilton's on a reasonably decent lap. He's just popped in 4th place again, just behind his teammate, but closer now. So only about a second and a half, just over. A tenth and a half, just over his teammate on that soft tyre. So a better lap, still not enough, I would say, because from what we've seen from Charles Leclerc, we'll get him closing out the lap shortly, he's on another flyer. We should be able to see more from a Ferrari right now on soft tyres in these conditions. I think that's exactly what we're about to find from Leclerc as he comes through the final sector down towards the last couple of corners to make his way round, and then he'll cross the finish line and we'll get a reading. He's currently third with his teammate in fourth. Out of the final corner he comes, heading down towards the line. DRS open, flat out towards the finish line. And there we go, top of the timesheet, Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari.
Fastest of anybody in the final sector. Leclerc laying down a marker in free practice 2 on the fastest rubber available to the drivers. So 1:16.439. Compare that to Lando Norris's 1:16.580 set a few laps ago. About a tenth and a half between them. Then it's Tsunoda and Hamilton, 4 tenths off at the moment on that last lap around, but he is out there still, Hamilton, on the soft tyre. So we shall see if he can improve and find that lap time.
But it was a really comparative lap, wasn't it? They happened pretty much at the same time, on the same tyre, the circuit in the same kind of conditions. That's Hamilton versus Leclerc in a Ferrari, albeit very early days. There's a big gap between the two of them, and it's the sort of thing that we've seen in the past at Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton. One of his weaknesses, if you can say Lewis has a weakness, it's when he starts to fall behind a teammate, and whether he questions his own ability, which seems a crazy thing to say to a 7-time world champion, but he has these confidence issues which can build up on top of each other, and as we saw last year, it can sometimes be quite detrimental to him. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Very, very early days.
It certainly is. What about the other McLaren though, Oscar Piastri, who's just put in a rapid lap, fastest of anybody in the final sector. The Australian pops himself ahead of his teammate Lando Norris into second, but it's still Charles Leclerc who has over a tenth on the rest of the field. Fastest in FP2 so far with a 1:16.4. Piastri, Norris is third. Tsunoda's time still holding in fourth. Then comes Hamilton. Isaac Hadjar is up in sixth in the second of the Racing Bulls. Then Lance Stroll is seventh, ahead of Russell, Sainz and Alonso, the top 10. Jack Doohan is 11th, ahead of Max Verstappen. Then it's Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon and Kimi Antonelli for Mercedes in 15th, ahead of Liam Lawson down in 16th. The two Saubers, Hülkenberg and Bortoletto, 17th and 18th with Esteban Ocon, propping up the field in 19th. Still no signs of an emergence for Ollie Behrman after that crash that he endured on the exit of turn 10 in free practice 1. The team were really hoping to get him out before the end of the session, but it might well be a fight against the clock on this one with 23 minutes and 12, 11 and 10 seconds remaining. Charles Leclerc being wheeled back into his garage, visor up and the sun glinting off of his eyes, and straight away in with the fan because it is hot. Air temperature is about 23, 24 degrees. The track temperature when we first started was about 43 degrees, and today's not even supposed to be the hottest day this weekend.
Yeah, and let's make the point, because this is a big one. All of the practice sessions that we have today, tomorrow morning, and then qualifying tomorrow afternoon, we expect to happen in conditions similar to this. Hot, dry, blue skies above us, very fast track, getting faster as the weekend progresses. And then on Sunday, there's a very high risk that we might be inundated with rain. It seems hard to believe looking out of our commentary box window right now, but that is the forecast, and that could really throw some cats amongst the pigeons, so to speak, couldn't it?
No.
All of the learning that's happening now may mean almost nothing when we're faced with a very wet track on Sunday.
That's why we love Formula One, isn't it? Because it can just change in an instant depending on the weather. Tsunoda's gone back out on track to try and gear up for another run on the soft tyre. He's out there with Verstappen and Hülkenberg. Alex Albon too is putting in the lappage, and Esteban Ocon. Everybody else is tucked up in the pit lane for the time being. Just to come back to our Tsunoda chat, I do feel a bit for Yuki. He felt like he was knocking at the door for ages. He'd done all he could necessarily do. He'd beaten all of the teammates that were placed alongside him. He finally got given a Red Bull test at the end of last year. I wonder how that went, because clearly, well, if he had massively impressed them, then I'd like to think he would have got his shot. But I also know that Formula One and politics go hand in hand sometimes, and as a driver that is quite closely associated with Honda, this is Honda's last year supplying Red Bull and Racing Bulls. do they want to be messing around with a Honda affiliated driver?
It's the sort of thing that, as you say, that politics can play a really big part in all of these sides of Formula One. The other side of it, though, of course, is that we only really see the results. We see the lap times, we see the positions, how they finish in a Grand Prix. The teams see a lot more than that. They understand how they work with engineers, how are they in terms of leading a team, working with mechanics. There's a whole nother side to being a Formula One driver that you only get to see when you work up close and personal with them, and those things are also important. So they've got a much bigger picture, a bigger data set to work with when making these decisions, much more so than just how quick in a car they are.
But even if Tsunoda has a good year this year, he could be done. There could be no seats for him next year.
It's a brutal game, isn't it?
There's talk of the Aston Martin link up at Honda, but Alonso, I'm sure, will very much want to stay and reap the benefits of Adrian Newey in a Honda engine, and Lance Stroll will stay there for as long as Lance and Lawrence want him to stay there. Where else are the opportunities for somebody like Yuki Tsunoda? But that is the name of the game sometimes. Talking of name of the game, Jack Doohan.
Please check floor. I bottomed a bit. Exit of turn 10.
Understood. We'll have a look.
He certainly did, and a lot of talk about flexi wings off the back end of last season and coming into this year as well, and bumping along the exit curbs. Everything was flexing on Jack Doohan's Alpine, and of course a name familiar to many motorsport fans. His father Mick, a 5-time 500cc motorcycle champion. Pressure in a name, a different sport, 2 wheels in that occasion. His son's gone for 4, but it's still a motorsport legendary name, and does that pile on even more pressure, adding to will he make it past 6 races this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure his father's accolades on 2 wheels will necessarily put pressure on him from the outside, but I do wonder internally, like within his family and within his social circles, friend groups, will he want to live up to his dad? That's one element we don't know of, but he's definitely got pressure, there's no question. There's always pressure as a Formula One driver anyway. Maybe that's even greater in your first season as a rookie, because everyone wants to know how good you really are. And we've also got talk at Alpine of the fact they've signed Franco Colapinto from Williams as their reserve driver. Now, we already know how good he is because he got nearly half a season with Williams last year and he put in some strong performances. So that will definitely be another thing that adds pressure to Jack Doohan's debut season. He has to deliver because we know they've got a ready-made replacement sitting in the wings if it doesn't work out. And as you just said a moment ago, Formula One can be brutal sometimes.
Do you think it's fair that Helmut Marko recently sort of came out with some rather nice quotes of listing drivers and where they ranked, especially the rookies, and he ranked Jack as a C-list driver out of the rookie crop? Do you think that's fair?
Hey, everyone's entitled to their opinions, but I think this is part of the games that Helmut Marko does love to play. Whether Jack Doohan will care what Helmut Marko thinks about him, and at this point, how on earth can you judge somebody as a C-grade driver when they haven't made their full debut yet? He will be judged, and he should be, and what will only be fair is if he's judged on the results that he gets over a reasonably long period of time. That's how you judge a driver, not before he's really sat in a car in anger. I know he got 1 race at the end of last season, but he was fairly anonymous in that one with very little to play for from his side. So we need to give him time before we start judging him.
Oh, well, I think he was also ranking Gabriel Bortoleto, the Formula 2 champion coming into Sauber this year, as a B-list driver. So I'm not sure Fernando Alonso, who manages Gabriel Bortoleto, will be too happy with Helmut Marko's words. But we all know that Helmut Marko, the motorsport advisor at Red Bull, in charge of their young driver development programme, does love to ruffle a few feathers up and down.
How do you think he rated Lawson?
A-star.
Do you think?
No, Verstappen's A-star,
exactly.
So Lawson A.
Yeah, but it's an interesting, wasn't it?
Wrong button, Benson.
Yeah, sorry, Lawson A is a bold call this early when he's so much behind Verstappen in his first race, I have to say. Sorry, I was trying to talk to the producer at the same time. I was getting that button wrong as well.
We're all a bit rusty, Benson.
I can't see whether the lights are on with the light coming into
we have got in the commentary box, it's a big glass window, and it's a nice view because if we can peek out over the top, we are literally right opposite the 100-metre braking board for turn 1. So get the exit of the entrance of turn 1 and the exit of the pit lane as well. So they do trundle past fairly quickly, and the grandstands opposite us are filling up nicely as the sun is shining, the caps are on, the sunscreen being passed around in full flow because it is rather hot and getting hotter in Melbourne with just 16 minutes left on the clock, and it is starting to get a little bit busier now on the circuit in these final few minutes of track action for Friday. Of course, we'll have one more practice session to go tomorrow, which you can listen to on 5 Sports Extra, and if you want to get up super early for that one, we'll be on air from 25 past 1 in the morning, not to be missed ahead of qualifying on Saturday. That'll be from 5 o'clock. The lights will go green in the morning, and you can hear that in full on BBC Radio 5 Live. And then, well, we really will get our questions answered as to what the pecking order will be. But this is kind of why we love the first race. Even though we've had pre-season testing and all the hype, we still don't really know what they've got in the tank.
It's so good. Normally I'd say, you need to be a die-hard fan to be getting up at that time of the morning to watch FP3, but this weekend I'd say do it, because every single session these cars are on track, we're going to learn something new. One of these major storylines, of which there are many running through this 2025 season, is going to take a step forward, and each time we get to see cars turning wheels, that progresses the storyline. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. I don't think we're overhyping this season. I hope we're not. I think seeing Lewis in a Ferrari is going to be amazing. I think the 2 McLarens look strong. The 2 Ferraris look great as well from what we've seen so far. And I'm sure there's more to come from Red Bull, Mercedes and others, with a very long season ahead of us. Yeah,
just having a little look down the timing screens, just noticed Sainz and Albon had the exact same lap time with a 1:17.302 for the 2 Williams drivers who are circling out on the track at the moment, because Albon's just come into the pits. Apologies. So as Sainz set it first, he goes ahead, and the other thing to note as well is what we got a little bit of a taste of it at the likes of Sao Paulo last year. We've had a few changes to the sporting regulations, but of course some of these practice sessions can prove quite vital in the unlikely events that sometimes we're not able to get qualifying going. And we were having this discussion before FP1, weren't we? That if for whatever reason we're not able to set the grid, where do we go from if it's not championship order? Because that seems a bit unfair to do a championship order for race 1. Well, surely the logical answer is to go back to an FP3 or an FP2.
Yeah, the way it's written in the regulations now is that it will be at the steward's discretion if that sort of set of scenarios plays out. And I think you're right, that's probably the fairest way that you could do it. But it means that, do you sort of put half an eye on that, given that it could be very wet on Sunday? I think Saturday should be clear enough to get qualifying in, so that shouldn't be a problem. But do you put half an eye on FP3 to bang in a quick lap just in case?
The other thing to note, which we haven't really covered off, there'll be no more points for fastest lap.
Good.
Happy with that?
Yeah, very much so. I thought it was I didn't see the excuse the pun, I didn't see the point of it.
Oh, very good.
It was one of those things that I couldn't understand what it added to the show. It was only ever really utilised by a car that had enough of a gap behind them at the end of a race for a free pit stop. They'd stick a soft set of tyres on and go and grab the fastest lap, or take it away from someone else. And I just didn't see that added to the spectacle, added to the show. I think it was really triggered by the move that Red Bull pulled with Daniel Ricciardo in what turned out to be his final race for the team, where he put a fast lap in at the end of a session way outside the points, just to take the fastest lap point away from Lando Norris and the McLaren, who is of course in a championship battle with the sister team Red Bull Racing and Max Verstappen.
Yeah, that certainly I think that annoyed quite a fair few of the paddock. What about a point for pole?
See, if you were going to give an extra point, for me that's it, because it rewards something spectacular. It rewards something that you're going to be going for anyway. The fastest lap point, like, no one has a target to get fastest lap in a Grand Prix, because you're all running on different strategies. It's not about having the fastest lap in a race, whereas on a Saturday that is the single target for everybody, getting the fastest lap possible. So yes, absolutely, if you want to reward something, reward that.
One of the other things to note as well, and this is more is quite specific to Melbourne, but I think it's worth talking about, and we always love it when we talk a little bit about tyres. This weekend we're expecting it to be either the strategy could be a one-stop or a two-stop, and Melbourne isn't always the most enthralling of races, let's be honest. It can throw up absolute chaos at times. But then we fast forward a little down the line in the season to Monaco, and, well, they have actually introduced a mandatory 2 stops in Monaco with no minimum stint length. Do you think that's the right way to go with Monaco?
Well, I think they had to do something. You either got to bin Monaco off the championship because the race is every single year it's dull. Unless you get some chaos like torrential rain happening at an opportune moment, you need something to spice it up. I'm not sure an extra pit stop for every team is absolutely going to guarantee us some sort of spectacle on race day. I don't think it will, but at least it gives another sort of unknown element, and it means that strategy has to come into some sort of play. If you've got a 1 stop, and we've seen this before, particularly if you get something like a red flag and you get that free change of tyres, well, then you've just got a procession from the moment they get going again to the end. So I applaud them for doing something different, and hopefully this is an experiment, which means that whether it works or not, we can iterate from it and hopefully find a good solution in the end.
Yeah, I am inclined to agree. I do worry, though, that maybe some of the teams further back could just effectively do that stop and then get on with it and try and hedge their bets and stay out there for as long as possible and look for a good result. But I suppose we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but we've still got to get Melbourne out the way first with 10 minutes and 3, 2, 1 second remaining of free practice 2. Seeing some long run pace being done by the likes of Williams and Alex Albon down in 12th at the moment. It's Charles Leclerc who has the fastest lap time, set on the soft tyre, a 1:16.439 ahead of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. Yuki Tsunoda's time is holding up well in 4th, ahead of Lewis Hamilton on a like-for-like run with Charles Leclerc earlier on the soft tyre, about 4 tenths down on his teammate as he gets to grips with his new life at Ferrari. Isaac Hadjar is up there in 6th, ahead of Max Verstappen, who has popped up into 7th, and Nico Hülkenberg actually has managed to haul that Sauber up into 8th, ahead of Stroll and George Russell now down to 10th. Then it's Sainz and Albon, followed by Alonso. Doohan and Gasly is 15th. Kimi Antonelli, Lancashire in 16th at the moment. I think he's out there on the hard tyre, actually, having a run on the hardest compound available to them this weekend, followed by Liam Lawson down in 17th. Gabriel Bortoletto is 18th. Esteban Ocon is 19th. And, well, with 9 minutes left on the clock, it's looking more and more unlikely that we will see Oliver Behrman out on track. So after his big crash in FP1, losing a lot of running and rather having to give his mechanics quite a lot of work to do in the gap, a big loss in track time and experience for the young British racer embarking on his first full season in Formula One, not out on track just yet.
And that's another blow for Behrman, really. It was a big enough blow, smashing the car up, of course, and curtailing his first session, and you feel bad as a driver for the team. You see the work you've created, but now to miss a whole session, it's not just about him in that car and learning the track and all these different things. It's about the data that you desperately needed to gather over this season. So as a driver, I've got no doubt he'll now start to feel that he's let the team down because they've got a lack of learning when they needed it most. And the knock-on effects from that accident, from that crash, are just rumbling on and on. He'll be able to get a good night's sleep and recover and go again tomorrow morning, and that's all he can do. But I've no doubt the feelings will be exacerbated, given that he's now missed an entire session as a result of that.
Yeah, it's not what they want, and there's a lot of head scratching going on up and down the grid. I think there's going to be a little bit of head scratching going on at Red Bull as well. Verstappen is circulating, but he's not without his issues. In FP1 was stuck in the garage for a fair while and has been making some tweaks to I think his front suspension as well when he came in, and giving up that track time to try and dial in that Red Bull car a little more. Meanwhile, Liam Lawson looks like he's been doing some race runs and hasn't exactly been putting in some good lap times on those race runs either, lagging a fair bit behind some of his competitors. So something not quite right down at Red Bull, or maybe they're just playing with some fuel loads. That's the other thing we don't know.
Well, look, I think we have seen Red Bull do that in the past, where they've struggled on a Friday but just turn it on for Saturday when things matter. But I think more telling is what we've seen from Verstappen in the way that he's having to drive that car, fighting at the steering wheel. It's not just about the lap times, it's about hearing him on the radio and the way he's talking to his engineer, the struggles that he's clearly having. That's, for me, more of an indicator that things are not happy. It's not just about the cars running heavy in fuel and they're not pushing. They're struggling to get that car to work. And that often runs through the weekend because you're always on the back foot chasing something, whereas when you can start on a really good car at the beginning of a weekend, you can gradually build from it. Having said that, we have seen Red Bull turn things around quite dramatically in the past, where a lot of work happens overnight back at the factories on the simulators and in the sort of mission control rooms, where they're able to find something, and it might just be a one thing that they're looking for that they find through delving into that data and information that then unlocks a bit more potential.
Well, that's what's we think, and trying to deduce to what's going on at the Red Bull adult team. The sister team, though, or the junior team, look like they've certainly put in some decent lap times on the soft tyre, but it will all come out in the wash come qualifying. But Tsunoda up in fourth, and Isaac Hadjar, we heard him on the radio actually at the end of FP1, really wasn't happy with his final run, and his engineer Pierre Hamlin was actually, well, it wasn't too bad for a bad run. You seem like you're doing all right. Yeah. Isaac Hadjar, he's had he's gone under the radar, I think, a little bit. He had a few FP1 outings last year, and as a result of the shuffling of Ricciardo, of Lawson, of Perez, he's somehow ended up as quite a big benefactor in getting his first shot in a Formula One car, which I think many hadn't quite seen enough from him in his Formula One outings. But his junior career has done very well for himself. Runner-up in Formula 2 last year. But what are you thinking about Isaac Hadjar at the moment, the young Frenchman?
Well, I think he's got a major opportunity, because Red Bull are struggling to find the successor that they need. Effectively, that junior team exists to find the next Sebastian Vettel, the next Max Verstappen, doesn't it? That's what they're looking for. It should be a progression through there to you unlock the potential of some young driver, and you find the one that is going to carry your team forward when a Verstappen either leaves, retires or whatever. It could be that he's the guy. We haven't seen the full potential of him yet, but the opportunity is there, because at the moment, you look around that Red Bull stable, there's no one that jumps out as being an obvious Max Verstappen successor. Could it be Isaac Hadjar?
Well, do you know what they call him in the French media, his nickname?
No.
Le Petit Prost.
Do they?
No,
that's not a bad nickname.
It's not a bad one to have, is it? And so far, well, he's nip and tuck, a little bit behind, but nip and tuck with his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. A few moments ago, we saw George Russell run deep at turn 13, lock up that front right, then managed to do a nice little pirouette and get back onto the circuit. Although I am a little worried, because there was a little family of ducks there on the grass on the inside. So I do hope they find their way back to the lake and not onto the track. But they are fairly visible. With less than 4 minutes on the clock now, could Oliver Behrman get out on track? His teammate is circling down in 19th, and the last of the runners out there. Behrman the only one not to get out onto the circuit, but it looked like he had his helmet in hand a few moments ago, and the team frantically trying to do up the bolts on the floor of that Haas to see whether they could get him out, even just to do a bit of an installation run, or indeed do a practice start come the end of the session.
Yeah, it'll be nice just to get something, wouldn't it, out of this session, just to sort of dust off the cobwebs and get back in that car so he can feel comfortable. But time is rapidly running out. We'll see if he manages to turn a wheel or not. But that'll be a big blow if he doesn't. He'll be on edge and he'll be waiting, prepared, ready to go. And if he doesn't manage to get into that car, it's going to be a real difficult afternoon for him. OK, I'll tell you what, Harry, it has been a very long wait, hasn't it, for this season? It seems like it's been going on forever, and whilst the anticipation has all been about getting to here and Melbourne, we all know that really the anticipation has been for this.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
You can go the distance, we'll find out.
Sounded like the producer had changed the voice intro there. Is that right, Paddy? No, it's just my ears, obviously blocked up over a winter of inactivity. Anyway, so you won't be surprised to hear, I don't think, that the quickest driver on the long run is Lando Norris. He's averaging 1 minute 21.983, with his teammate Oscar Piastri second quickest, a couple of tenths behind. Between the Ferrari drivers, Leclerc is next quickest after Norris, and a couple of tenths on average quicker than Hamilton. Verstappen's done fewer laps than Norris, so it's hard to compare, but if you compare like for like of the first 3 or 4 laps, he's a couple of tenths behind Norris as well. The Mercedes drivers are both looking very quick, but they're on the hard tyre, so you can't compare them really with the other drivers who are all on the mediums. But between them, Russell and Antonelli, actually Antonelli's slightly quicker on the race run, which is very interesting. And I would say that Yuki Tsunoda's not looking too bad in the Racing Bull, but he's a couple of tenths behind Carlos Sainz. But Sainz is kind of mixing it in Ferrari territory behind the McLarens, which is very interesting for Williams. Yeah.
Well, I think if you go back and listen to this week's Checkered Flag podcast, one of the bold predictions I made was that a driver outside of the top 4 teams could win this race if it rains on Sunday. I wonder if that could just be Carlos Sainz.
And I think I said a Racing Bull could end up there. So come on, let's see what happens. And you can get the full preview with myself, Mark, Andrew and Rosanna on your Checkered Flag podcast feeds after this session, perhaps. And build yourself back up for free practice 3. Well, that tees us up very nicely, doesn't it? Going into Saturday, of course, that's how Andrew has managed to crunch the numbers during the session. There'll be a more detailed breakdown later on today, and you can see that in his report on the BBC Sport website when that is published. But that is tantalising. Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull, maybe are they on the back foot now? Could a Williams spring a surprise and be up there with the Ferraris? And what about the best of the rest? Is it a Racing Bull? We don't know.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And also the fact that Mercedes have done much of their running on that hard tyre today suggests that they may even be looking at a slightly different tyre strategy. It may come to nothing if it is wet on Sunday and we're not looking at using any of these dry tyres in the race. We'll see. But it's fascinating to see that that's the sort of gaps between, a couple of tenths between each of those drivers on the long runs. That's not about all-out, flat-out qualifying pace. That's over a long-run sort of average. That's pretty close, really, when you think about race runs. And given that it's the first race of the season where anything could have happened, people could have come out the box with all sorts of different cars at different performance levels, the reality is, kind of as we expected, things are going to be tight.
I also think, just coming back to that Mercedes chat with Antonelli looking like he's a bit quicker than Russell on the long runs, I think it's actually been really important that Antonelli has had quite a smooth, under-the-radar start to practice here in Melbourne. Haven't really seen him do anything, go wide. It's actually been his teammate Russell that's been the one making the lockups.
That's true, yeah, it's right. The checkered flag is out, by the way, so the clock's down to 0. The session has finished on the circuit. But Antonelli, it's important to note that whilst this is his full race debut, he's had a lot of time in the testing of old cars. A sort of 2-year-old car at Mercedes. They've given him an extensive programme, and it's about getting to know how to work with tyres, how to look after tyres and manage them in race situations. That's the thing that is the biggest learning curve for a new driver coming into the sport. The races are much longer than they've been used to. The tyres and the way the cars work are very different. So even though you're working with a 2-year-old car, you still get to understand how a Pirelli tyre works over a lot of laps, over a long run, and that might well play into that.
Well, let's see how it all continues to unfold across this weekend. The checkered flag is out at the end of FP2, and it's Charles Leclerc for Ferrari, fastest, ahead of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. His teammate Lando Norris follows in third. Yuki Tsunoda up there in the Racing Bull in fourth, ahead of Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari. And Racing Bull, have they got pace? Isaac Hadjar, the rookie, is also up there in sixth, ahead of Max Verstappen. Nico Hülkenberg put in a good lap time towards the end to get his Sauber up to 8th, ahead of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin. George Russell running wide a couple of times throughout the session today, ending up in 10th for Mercedes, ahead of Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, the 2 Williams drivers, identical lap times to them both. Fernando Alonso behind them in 13th. Jack Doohan, the Australian rookie at Alpine, in 14th, finishing ahead of his teammate Pierre Gasly. Kimi Antonelli, who we've just been talking about, down in 16th at the end of all that in the Mercedes, ahead of Liam Lawson. And it does look like there are some questions to be answered still down at Red Bull. Bortoletto in 18th, Esteban Ocon 19th, and the last of the runners in the Haas, because Oliver Behrman, for all the might of the mechanics, did not get out in time for the session. So that'll be a shame for him on the back foot going into FP3. But Rosanna, I mean, if Andrew's long runs are anything to go by, we are in for an exciting qualifying and a mega race.
We really are. As Andrew was saying that, I was busy writing down Antonelli quicker on long run pace than George Russell. I mean, that is not what we were perhaps expecting, but who knows, as the weekend continues, we'll start to get an even better picture of the pecking order. And I'm just sitting outside the Haas garage, and I've just watched the team come back through into the paddock, shaking their head. Big disappointment there that they couldn't get Ollie Behrman out. He'll be disappointed. Of course, the first thing we heard on the radio when the crash happened in FP1 was him just apologising to the team. So hopefully he can pick himself up and come out fighting tomorrow for FP3 and qualifying, which, by the way, will be very, very hot. We're going to have temperatures up into the 30s tomorrow. Not maybe as sunny, but it will be very, very hot before that cool change comes on Sunday.
All right, thanks, Rosanna. We'll check in with you a little later, tomorrow in FP3. We'll catch up with you then, or you can hear us all on the Checkered Flag podcast previewing the weekend too. Lewis Hamilton has just launched himself away in his Ferrari on a practice start. That like-for-like lappage, 4/10 down. How will he reflect on his first day in an official session on a weekend for Ferrari?
I think deep down there'll be a little bit of concern. On the Charles Leclerc side, he'll be very happy, of course. It's sort of first blood to Charles Leclerc. But on the flip side, Lewis will play that down, as he should. This is day one of a very long season, of a very long period of learning for him and Ferrari.
What happens overnight now into FP3? What are the mechanics and engineers doing?
It's a huge amount of work in the garage, but especially back home, back at base. The simulators will be running, the team at Mission Control will be trawling through data. There's a lot to learn, and they can put a lot of that into practice when they come back tomorrow.
Well, look, that is the first day done. FP1 and FP2 done, and it's Charles Leclerc who is fastest at the end of FP2. You can join us for free practice 3 on 5 Sports Extra on Saturday. We'll be on air from 1 in the morning, and then qualifying will get going from 4:55 in the morning on BBC Radio 5 Live. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. See you tomorrow.